Welcome, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More Sports podcast, the college offseason podcast. You could say we are less of the regular season, more of the offseason. I know that very cringy thing that Matt just enjoys oh so well. We wanted to start maybe a couple minutes earlier, but this one right here wants to keep licking my hands while I'm working the computer. He almost also shut down the entire podcast, like putting his paw on the computer. So I don't know. I'm going to try to give you all a good episode, but Bean might make it very difficult. The Emperor has spoken.
Bean is displeased with our topic selection for the day.
I think he's mad we're not talking enough about him. The ones on the YouTube, I don't know, the ones on the YouTube channel can probably see him smacking me right now.
I think they count. Now they can't. He's gone down now. He's just licking the hand underneath the camera.
Yeah, look at this. Look at this. Oh, there he is.
There he is. Oh, good job, Bean.
No, okay. But anyways, before Bean takes control of the entire podcast any more than he already does, doing it again, any more than he already does, Matt and I are here to talk about the college basketball free agency period. Transfer portal.
You're not wrong.
It's kind of valid. It's kind of valid.
yeah.
You want to hear a crazy stat?
Is it the one about how many players on scholarship have entered the trade deadline?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. 20% of all Division I hoopers have entered the transfer portal.
That's impressive.
That is really impressive.
That is hugely impressive.
I'm not even mad. I'm impressed.
Yes. And if you're mad, sorry.
Yep. Bye, Boomer.
Get over it.
Anyways, so Matt, my first question to kick off this podcast today is, has the college basketball portal, you think, matched the college football transfer portal as far as entertainment?
Oh, yeah, definitely. If anything, I think it's more impressive now because, with NCAA football, you've got so many schools, where you're really going to have a realistic shot. With the basketball portal, you've got the mid-majors, you've got guys who are leaving Division II now. Louisville, for example, has a JUCO player of the year who's coming in, who's one of their hot recruits who's transferring. If anything, it's infinitely more interesting because there's so many layers to it. I don't really do much with college football recruiting, Les. I know that's your forte. But it seems like to me like the hype there is still mostly around the guys who you can recruit to your program, whether it be like an Arch Manning, whether it be guys like that at Texas, things like that. Whereas with college basketball, your rosters are so limited and you have such a deep pool of players. Like I said on our last podcast, you don't have to wait that recruiting cycle to get the point guard of the future. You can go out and get them now. And they may be a dude who was like the division player, the JUCO player of the year at Vincennes University. And I think that adds up because ball translates across the board. We've talked about this ad nauseum ever since we've been doing this podcast, Les, is that the parity in college basketball keeps going up and up and up every year. And that spreads across all levels of play. And that's what makes the big difference here is that, it's just so much deeper now. You're not going to see a lot of guys from, Wabash up in Indiana jump from Wabash to Notre Dame. But you can see something like that in college basketball. And it'd still be fairly big news, a big pull on the roster that gets plugged. So, yeah, I think now, especially, that the college basketball NIL roster transfer portal is infinitely more interesting than football. And a little bit of that is my own bias. I prefer basketball. But I just think that's how it is now, just because you've got so many levels with so few positions that you've got just a great option of players instead of just going, okay, maybe this kid's going to leave Oklahoma and come to Alabama or something like that. It's so much more intriguing when your roster is being filled by guys where they're okay, but you're just wondering how they're going to play out at the next level.
You touched on a really good point that I want to talk about. And in basketball, you see more often than not those players that are coming from the non-Power 5 schools to the Power 5 schools, and they're not missing a beat. I'm a Texas fan. An example is Sir Jabari Rice this year. Yeah. Antonio Reeves at Kentucky, just so I'm not too biased here. But you see it more common in basketball than you do in football. Don't get me wrong, you see it. It's just not as common. And, yeah. Even though, football, I guess comparatively, there are a lot of football transfers every year, yes. But comparatively, you got to think there's 100 players on each roster spot in college football versus 15 for college basketball. Comparatively, the numbers are not the same. And not to mention, the players that are in this year's transfer portal for college basketball are way bigger names. This is like, it almost does, and kind of how we started the podcast, it almost does feel like an NBA free agency. And like where you have like, you remember the 2011 NBA free agency that had like LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire? This is almost what it feels like this year. I love it because there's so many moving pieces. There's so much like just parity that's going to be added to college basketball. And the best part about all this is we're doing a transfer portal episode today, but it's not going to be the last one we do. We're going to do it. No, not even close. We're just going to talk about like a few like key points that we're going to talk about today. Like it's for a few players that we want to specifically highlight for specific reasons. But no, we're going to be doing several episodes on the transfer portal just because there's so many names, so many moving pieces, and I'm looking forward to it. This is why I'm really excited that we changed our niche to this, because this has just been so much fun to cover. This has been so much fun to take notes about. So without further ado, I want to get into the first name, Matt, if that's okay. Unless you want to add something.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, good, because we're going to do it anyway. Anyways, the first name I want to talk about, and this was probably the biggest name that surprised me, and that was, and I'm going to kind of not keep it with men's college basketball. I'm going to go to the women's game, and I'm going to talk about Haley Van Lith. And I want to shout out Peyton Siva for a great conversation he and I had on Twitter. But Haley Van Lith, a lot of you all know, Louisville guard, was one of the trio of women's college basketball players that gave so much publicity to women's basketball this year, and it was great. Matt, first question, what were your thoughts on this move? If she hasn't committed by Monday, any idea where you think she's going?
No, but I just want to talk about the overall standpoint from this first, which is that this is an example, I think, of how like the transfer portal is going to change not just men's sports but women's sports, because I don't remember the last time we talked a little about it last year with the Cavender twins down in Miami, but this is a lot different than that. This is I had to think of a good analogy, and it's still not great, Les, but let me explain it as we go along.
Okay.
This to me feels like when Kevin Durant left Oklahoma City. A good player on a pretty talented, successful team that just couldn't get over the hump. And she's looking for a place where maybe she doesn't have to carry all of the load of Louisville basketball. Maybe she goes to a Stanford and teams up with their awesome point guard. Maybe she goes to, I don't think this is going to happen, but this is just an example, an Iowa and teams with Caitlin Clark. Maybe she forms like a Golden State Warrior type thing. And that's why I compare it to Kevin Durant, a good player on a good program that's looking to maybe take their game a little step further. And that to me is even more intriguing than some of the men's movements, because this is the kind of thing that, makes or breaks a championship probably at that level. You just go somewhere and team up with another All-American, and bada bing, you've got like one hell of a roster. And I think it's great that we're talking about it like this in this rate, that the women's player has elevated to the point where like this is huge news. This is like breaking the coverage news around here. And I think that's great, because we wouldn't have that without this transfer portal, without this NIL thing. The one thing I will say about destination with her is, like, we all know the Adidas money runs deep. So an Adidas school, maybe she goes to a Miami or something like that. But Adidas schools run deep. Maybe she goes to Indiana and teams up with Mackenzie Holmes. Like I said, it's possible to create like some kind of very special team, somebody who's going to get over the hump now. And that's what makes it special. We have a really extremely talented player who's been on some extremely talented teams, who's just now looking for one last shot to get over the hump. And it's really a testament to see how many people are talking about this, how many people are tweeting about this, that, the transfer portal isn't hurting anybody, because now women's basketball is on the up and up. We've got 9.9 million people watching it, the championship game. It's just exciting. It's just exciting because now not only are we talking about the men's players who are transferring, we're talking about a potential championship piece women's player who's already on the move. And I think that's great exposure for the sport of women's basketball. I think that's going to stoke rivalries across the landscape of that sport. And I'm really excited to see where she goes, because she's a hell of a player. And like I said, she teams up with somebody, they get a little thing going. That could be a national championship right there.
I was a little skeptical of the Kevin Durant, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Analogy. But No, that's actually spot on because this is weird to say because we're so being a Louisville native, we're so used to like Louisville being successful in the Jeff Walls era.
Yeah,
But this is seemingly like a more of a rebuild mode than in years past.
yeah.
And this seems to be, like you said, a win now move for Haley Van Lith. And because it seems like a win now move, my initial thought was Stanford. And my reasoning behind that is she's from the West Coast, team up with Cam Brink, and that would be lethal. But of course, she would have to get out of her Adidas NIL deal for that, which is doable. Those things are not,
Fine.
that right. They're not life. They're not. It's not be good. Anyways, yeah, they're not for life or anything, so she can easily get out of it if she wants to. But
Yeah.
another couple ideas I heard, the Mic'd Up podcast also suggested a possible move to LSU, which he made a great point behind that. And here's why. Baylor was Haley Van Lith's second choice when she was coming out of high school. And who was the coach back then, Matt? Kim Mulkey. And going to LSU on paper, you add her to a team that just won the championship, bro, that's legendary. That's Avengers Justice League type shit right there. Let's be
That
honest.
would really help my analogy about Kevin Durant, wouldn't it?
It absolutely would. Not to mention, whoa gosh, can we think of superhero nicknames for that squad?
We'll get there. Let's let it happen, and then
Let's let it happen. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm also like wondering. I feel like Haley and Angel would be such an interesting combination too.
yes, it would be. You would not want to be caught running your mouth at a ball game with those two.
Oh, not
They
at
would
all.
make,
Unless
they'd
you
make
can back it up.
words and
Unless
make
you
you
can,
cry.
unless you can really back it up. But
But,
the third good point I heard was from and also a good friend of mine, Jacob Klukas, who most of the fans of the show know all too well. He also suggested Washington because again, West Coast roots, and if she wanted to stick to her Adidas NIL deal, Washington is an Adidas school. I mean, again, only 19 and 15 a year ago, not really impressive on paper. However, the 2022 recruiting class was the highest recruiting class in school history. And then the current recruiting class has 3 ESPN top 100 players. So I guess my logic, but I guess my defense for that would be she trusts the process, right? Because I mean that looks like a team that's on the rise. So if she wants to return home to the West Coast and to a team that's on the rise that maybe puts her over the top, Washington might be the route to go, and she could even stick to her Adidas deal.
yeah, and that's a lot of sweet money that stays in place.
Absolutely. So you ready? You want anything? You want to add anything to Haley Van Lith, or are we moving on to the men's side?
No, I think we hit everything we needed to there. I mean, let's go ahead and hit the men's side and see what we can get into.
All right. So the first player I want to talk about is the one that really kicked off the star players entering the transfer portal, and that is former Michigan big man Hunter Dickinson. Matt, what were your thoughts on this?
I was surprised, and I'm even more surprised with what the crystal ball was saying about where he's going, which is Maryland. I mean, I like Maryland. Maryland has currently, per 24/7 Sports, they've got the 17th recruiting class coming in. Not a lot of transfers at the moment. They've got one who's a shooting guard named Chance Stevens, but they got a really good recruiting class. But I just don't get why you go from the Big Ten to the Big Ten. It's like what we talked about. Oh crud, the quarterback at Iowa who transferred to Michigan.
Oh
It's like,
yeah,
or vice versa. Cade McNamara. It's like Iowa.
Iowa.
But Maryland, I kind of get. Kevin Willard had exceeded expectations by a good margin in that first year with the Terrapins. But it just surprises me that Hunter Dickinson would want to leave Juwan Howard in the Big Ten for the Big Ten. The other team that I heard float around was Kentucky, and that he had already and that they did a Zoom meeting with John Calipari, which of course John Calipari is going to do his due diligence. But I don't know about that one. Kentucky's roster, number one recruiting class, loaded with freshmen. Adding Hunter Dickinson to the mix certainly doesn't hurt. He's going to be a good rim protector and rebounder, but I don't exactly know whether or not that's a perfect move for him. But everyone thinking he's going to go to Maryland really surprised me because it's like I said, it's just why would you leave the Big Ten for the Big Ten?
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I feel like the only reason he would leave the Big Ten for the Big Ten is because the Big Ten might be the conference that fits his style of play the best.
Which is
And I know a lot of buzz is going on about him either going to Maryland or Virginia, given the proximity of his hometown. But I'm gonna be one thing clear right now, and as I say this, watch, it's gonna happen. But I don't think the Kentuckys or the Dukes are gonna get Hunter Dickinson. And to be completely honest, I don't think they should want Hunter Dickinson
Yeah.
because if you look at the stereotypical big man that Calipari likes, that shot blocking rim protector that can step out and guard the pick and rolls, that's not Hunter Dickinson. Hunter Dickinson is very slow footed. Yes, he can be a mound, like a stationary in the post, but you ask him to switch out on a guard, he's burnt toast all day long. So no, and the same goes for Duke. And I'll talk about a couple guys that I think I would like to see Duke get, but one thing you'll notice is that those guys are not the same mold as Hunter Dickinson. But I'm gonna tell you, and this was inspired by my good friend Gary Davis. I think Gonzaga would be a great fit for him because I think if you look at his mold and kind of what Drew Timme was, it's a similar, different, but similar. And I feel like as Drew Timme eventually does move on from Gonzaga basketball, I think Hunter Dickinson is a good transfer to kind of transition from the Timme era for Mark Few. So I think that would be a good fit. Obviously, I'm not predicting him to go to Gonzaga. And I want to get one thing straight right now to anybody listening to us. We're not journalists right now. We're not reporters. We're not actually telling you these are where the players are going. We're just telling you where we think would be really cool for whatever that's worth. We're fans of recruiting. We're fans of the transfer portal, and we're fans of coaching carousels. We're just like, hey, that sounds really cool. That's about the extent of it. We do have some facts to support it, but again, it's not like I'm on the phone. It's not like I'm on the phone with Hunter Dickinson tonight, being like, "Hey, where you going, bud?" First of all, he's not. He wouldn't even be allowed to talk about it for one. I mean, but yeah. Anyways, that wraps up it. What?
We call him right now. Hey, Hunter. Hi, we're on the podcast, man. You got to give us an answer right now.
Watch him hang up.
That would be hilarious.
That's exactly what it would do. He would just be like, click, because they're not allowed. Because until they decide where they're going to go, they're not allowed to talk about it.
He would probably hit me with the Aaron Rodgers to lose my number, but I'd be like, how did I get it? You didn't think of that, did you?
Oh, exactly. You gave it to me, bud. Anyways, so we ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
So this one is one I want to talk about, not because it's North Carolina falling apart, but Caleb Love going to Michigan. And Matt, I want to be honest, I kind of want to talk about this one because this one kind of fits what you and I were talking about as why the Big Ten needs to adapt. I look at Michigan, and they're losing a couple guys, but they're most notably they're losing a big. Now they're bringing in a modern combo guard to replace as a star player. Is this kind of the type of moves that need to keep happening to gain momentum for the Big Ten to change their style of play?
Yeah, but here's the thing that scares me about this, Les. Like you said, you mentioned Hunter Dickinson's transferring, but let's not forget who else they're losing.
Jett Howard, yeah.
Jett Howard's gone. Kobe Bumpkin's gone. Joey Baker declared that he's leaving the basketball world today. I mean, Michigan's got a pretty gutted roster right now. They've added Caleb Love, of course. They've added Trey Jackson, a very good 6'10" power forward coming over from the Big East and Seton Hall. They've got some recruits coming in. George Washington III, good shooting guard coming in, but you can't have two shooting guards. But while I think it's a good move for Caleb Love, I wonder how much of the offense is going to have to be him at this point, because there's a lot of I don't know if Jalen Llewellyn can come back, if he can, from that torn ACL, if he's got a year of eligibility still left. I'm assuming he took a medical red shirt because he didn't play many games. If he plays like that, then yeah, they're going to be fine. I think Michigan, like Michigan State, because of who their coach is, are going to be one of the Michigan and Michigan State, because of who their coaches are two of the teams who adapt to the modern-ish style of basketball the best, and that includes Caleb Love, who you said is a more modern two guard. But he's going to put up a lot of shots a game. We know that. So it'll be interesting to see whom. While it's the right move for a Big Ten school, right now Michigan's 21st overall in the recruiting rankings between transfers and their recruiting class coming in. Depending on who they get back, I think they're definitely going to be a team to watch out for, because I think they're going to play kind of like that anti-Big Ten regular season style basketball, or maybe they don't, exactly beat everybody, but they get into the NCAA tournament with a fairly good record, and that's when guys like Jawan Howard, who just bring in the most talented guys they can get, will shine. So yeah, it's a good move. It's a good move, but I'm still worried. I'm a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see basically how Michigan constructs the rest of that roster with as many losses as they're taking at the moment.
Which is a very good point. But my thing is, they're going to need, like you said, they're going to need Caleb Love to be the it guy year one, or if they want to have any kind of success. My thing
Yeah.
is, from experience as a Duke fan, he has no problem being that it guy. He is
Yeah.
not lacking in confidence. This is a guy who will pull up from the logo and spray on you if you're not careful. Yes, I know he struggled with efficiency this year, but this is a guy that when he is feeling it, there is not a player in the country that can stop him.
But
And
Les, there is one thing. There is somebody who can that he hasn't played yet.
who is
Big
that?
Ten officiating.
Oh, touche.
There is that question of like, how do you adapt to the fact these guys aren't going to call it when you take an elbow to the neck unless they absolutely have to.
But I mean, you're not going to be getting too many elbows from the neck if you're pulling up from the logo at the same time.
Mm, Big Ten.
Touche. But still.
Big Ten.
But anyways,
Go on,
Caleb
go on, go
Love.
on.
Usually, when you see a player that is struggling with this kind of efficiency, you kind of need him to have a change of scenery. And I think this
Yeah.
is exactly what this mood was. And I'm going to be honest, I don't understand a lot of the flack that Juwan Howard is getting on Twitter because Caleb Love, he made it very clear that he wants to go to a coach that's going to hold him accountable. And they're like, oh, well, that's not Juwan Howard. Well, how do you know? I mean, do you know Juwan Howard? I mean, Juwan Howard, I always thought was a good coach. I mean, am I missing something here, Matt? Like,
No, I think the problem is that every year Michigan has a really talented roster. And especially the past 2 years, they've either struggled to get into tournament or missed it entirely. And I feel like people are forgetting the fact that like Michigan, especially this year, lost their starting point guard for the year. Their highly touted transfer in the second game of the year, pretty much. And so it's really hard to judge a coach when he's losing that much all at once. So I feel like Dewan Howard is almost a victim of his own success because it's like we've talked about in the past. Guys like Musselman, guy are hard to evaluate as coaches because when you play that style of basketball, when you go after the superstars and try to get some recruits to go in there too, it's going to take months to gel when you have that much turnover on your roster every year. And it just becomes it becomes a matter of talent and racing against the clock to figure out when you're going to put it together and praying that you put it together in time and have enough good individual performances to get you into the NCAA tournament. Because once you get to the promised land, championship week, NCAA selection Sunday, that's when like a team with that much talent can really shine. And we've seen that happen in the past. But because of that, when that doesn't work out, and it doesn't always work out, we have a tendency to be quick to judge and be like, oh, well, they're just not a good coach. Instead
mhm.
of realizing that coaches who do that are micromanaging personality after personality every single year. And I feel like that's really what hurts Juwan Howard the most is that he deals in so much talent that like when the rosters come together, it's a beautiful thing. And when they don't is when we're like, oh, terrible coach. Instead of realizing maybe that the chemistry just ain't there. And that's just
Right.
modern basketball.
Unfortunately, yeah. But anyways, I guess the main point that we talked about is Caleb Love. It might, as of right now, Caleb Love is going to have to be the guy. But I guess
Yes,
my next
he's going to
question
be the
is,
fourth option.
with Caleb Love falling into place, how much does this, I guess, flip over the domino that makes other people want to join Michigan now?
Michigan?
Mm-hmm.
Just Michigan, just not the Big Ten in general. Let me sure I heard you.
Michigan,
Okay.
yes.
I think it does. I mean, especially if Juwan Howard rehabilitates that image. Because, like we said, that North Carolina team this year was just one of the great unmitigated disasters in college basketball history, period, end of statement. If he can go through it and, shape up his image a little bit, turn him into that dude who's dangerous from the logo, that's going to make more people fall in line, I think. But there are also dudes who out there who probably don't want to play with a guy who's going to be that ball dominant. It's a give and take. It's just who you attract as a player. Who do you vibe with? And getting guys like that in to help fill out your roster construction. Because there are some guys who I know who have probably been at places like, Harvard, Princeton, Northern Colorado, Colorado State, who have been like dying to be like the guy at a big school. And if you're
Mhm.
playing with Caleb Love, yeah, you're playing with a supremely talented guy, but you're also playing with a guy who's going to want that ball in his hand every possession, especially on ones that matter. And so it's just a matter of mindset, where who you attract, who you're friends with, who you can vibe with, and how other people perceive you as
Mhm.
a player. And if that all falls into place, then it's perfect and wonderful. If it doesn't, and you're just the guy, then it's just you. It's on you.
Yeah, and I've been listening to several podcasts, and they're talking about guys that transfers that Michigan should go after. And there's too many for us to name right now,
Oh yeah.
as we still have more players to get to. But there's a common theme. They're all athletic, off the ball style players.
Yeah. And that's who
I
you got to
think,
get to play with them.
and that is proves Matt's point perfectly. So, anyways, we're moving on to the last player we're going to talk about today. And as we talk about the most surprising move in general, I want to go to the most surprising move on the guy side specifically. And I'm going to talk about Ryan Nimhard transferring from Creighton. And this was surprising to me because Creighton had a good season. They went to the Elite Eight, and Nimhard was the catalyst. So
Yep.
I would think this has to be more of a tradition, that he would have to move to a more traditional power, right? That's what this kind of looks like to me. What are your
To
thoughts?
me, yeah, to me it's Arizona for him.
Mhm.
Tommy Lloyd recruited him. Tommy Lloyd's the head coach there now. Do I have that right? You're staring
Tommy
at me.
Tommy Lloyd recruited his brother at Gonzaga.
Okay. Okay, you were kind of staring at me. I want to make sure Dove was like, did I get the wrong coach? But Tommy Lloyd recruited his brother, Tommy at Gonzaga. Tommy Lloyd's the head coach of Arizona now. Kirk Kisa is gone. He's at West Virginia.
Which is
That
a
was
weird
another.
move too, by the way.
They deserve each other. Sorry.
Why do they deserve each other?
That was
Hold on.
me.
I
That
feel
was
like there's a
me.
story behind this.
Later. Later we'll
Okay,
get to it. But
fine.
yeah, their point guard's gone. I mean, I think it's a solid move for me for him to upgrade to Arizona. Not that like Creighton is a bad program by any stretch of the imagination, but you get to the Pac-12, you get to a program like Arizona. I don't know how many international guys they've got coming in this year, but if they're anything like the last couple of years, they're going to be pretty good. They've got to give the Pac-12. I got to be honest, Les. The Pac-12 is usually pretty wide open. And I mean, yeah, you've got Bardwell Mack transferring into Cal with their new coach, Mark Mad Dog Madsen. You've got UCLA, who's just going to be good forever. But you've got USC, who's got a great class coming in, which may or may not have Bronny James. We don't
I was
know
gonna
yet.
say you might want to say that. You might want to say that.
We may or may
Isaiah Collier's recruiting the shit out of him right now.
He is. But it's a top heavy conference of Pac-12. I mean, once you get into like to the Washingtons, the Washington States, and then you've got Arizona State. You've got teams in there that are good, but it's also not having to go through the gauntlet that is the Big East or the
Mm.
Big Ten. So I don't blame it all for pursuing like Arizona, especially. I mean, like I said, you've got ties there. You know Coach Lloyd. You know how he develops guards. I would consider you're going to have a little bit of a hungrier approach after that upset loss to Princeton. For me, Arizona makes a lot of sense for Nemhard, no question.
And I think we could do almost an entire episode on which Nimhard brother is better between Ryan and Andrew. Because like both,
Ooh.
I absolutely love both of their games. And of course, Andrew is actually having quite a bit of success with the Pacers right now, or at least more so than some thought he would, at least.
Yeah,
But and it's funny you mentioned um the international player, I guess, trend that Arizona's been bringing in the last several years that really even started before Tommy Lloyd. I mean, that's actually
yeah.
carried over from when the time Sean Miller was there. But Ryan Ryan Nimhard, he's from Canada. He's not from the United States, so that kind of fits that trend as well.
It does. I forgot about that. My mind forgets like who's from where.
Right. But I mean, anyways, no, I think I would agree it's Arizona. For all the reasons Matt said, that was actually going to be, if Matt didn't say it, I was going to say it. So, but whoever is getting him is getting a fantastic point guard.
That they are.
I mean, he might or may not be, probably in my opinion, the best point guard in this transfer class. Maybe not. I don't know.
Maybe it's hard telling.
Anyways, we may have to do a podcast later where we rank players. I don't know. We'll see.
We could.
We could. But anyways, for time constraints, because we have about 8 minutes left, I do want to get to the final two topics of the day. And Matt and I are going to give our underrated transfer and then a move we would like to happen. So, Matt, who is your underrated transfer?
Well, across college basketball, there's one program that we talk about ad nauseum when it comes to finding players and bringing them in via the transfer portal. So much so that they've reached out to not one, not two, not 10, not 20, not 40, not 60,
But
but
85.
84 players. 84 players has Arkansas reached out to over the course of their transfer portaling this year. And I think they've got two good ones in point guard Trayvon Mark. He's coming from Houston. And I think they've got another good one in point guard Kenyon Manyfield from Washington, aforementioned. I think those are two really good underrated moves. I think that that's going to pay off going forward because Arkansas has a pretty good recruiting class with two guys in it, including a 7-foot center. Makai Mitchell leaving via the transfer portal surprised me. But as we talked about, they've got Brazil coming back. They've got a lot of guys like Jordan Walsh who could come back. And now they've got even more solid guards to replace it in case Anthony Black and Nick Smith decide to move on with their NBA careers. Two underrated moves, two really good point guards. I like it for Arkansas. Eric Musselman continues to import players to his system, and it's beautiful.
Can we just nickname Eric Musselman Coach Transfer?
Yeah.
That would be dope. I think every coach needs a nickname.
I call him the importer on Twitter, but that kind of sounds creepy to me.
Yeah, that's a little creepy. I think, and not to mention, I don't know if I want to be like everyone else on Twitter. I don't want to have our own thing here. We can just call him Coach Transfer.
We're coming for you, John Rothstein.
But anyways, I'm actually surprised because my underrated move might be even more underrated, and Bean knows it's underrated because he's giving me a hug. Stop kissing me, dude. But my move might be even more underrated than Matt's. And I'm going to go with former TCU big man Eddie Lampkin moving from the Horned Frogs to Colorado, which I want to say, did you honestly think that Deion Sanders going to Colorado would only impact the football program? I'm not saying it has anything to do with this, but it definitely has brought a swagger to the University of Colorado athletic program. And if anything at all, as a Texas fan, we played TCU a couple times. Eddie Lampkins, if anything at all, he's big. He's 6'11", 300 pounds. He's physical. Good luck. If at the very least, he's going to wear down your centers just having to guard him for 40 minutes. So anyways, but he's also a real scrappy big guy who plays hard and also has a soft touch around the rim. I think there's a lot to like about him. He's rated a 4-star transfer prospect. So, hey, I think it's very slept on. And if anything at all, it's going to add some physicality to that Colorado front line.
Colorado is 18th overall in the current recruiting class rankings and fourth in the Pac-12, which is pretty good considering where they normally are.
Absolutely. That is a step in the right direction. But anyways, so now we are going to the last part of the podcast, which is a move we would like to happen. So Matt, what is it, bud?
Les, this is one I've been thinking about a lot because we've been talking about we're going to be selfish here, I think, to both of us and talk about our teams a little bit because I'd really just like to see Indiana get a shooter. I don't care really who at this point. I know Ledlum's on the table. I know that there's a kid from Northern Colorado who's on the table. I know they've already got Peyton Sparks, but I just want Indiana to get some shooting here. You can say what you want about Kalel Ware. If he comes tomorrow, that's great. But that's not the problem Indiana's had. Indiana's had big men in the past, and they'll continue to have big men going forward. I just want shooting. I don't care if they get Max Abmas. I don't care if they get Chris Ledlum. They missed out on Jamison Battle to Ohio State. I was a little bit sad over that. But I just want shooting at Indiana University. Good, consistent shooting. Because if they can get that, then they'll actually be set up pretty well to go pretty far.
And I'm going to do the exact same thing Matt did, as he said, and talk about my Duke Blue Devils. And as I mentioned, this is where I was leading to as I mentioned earlier in the podcast. I would like to see either Kalel Ware or Caden Shedrick go to Duke. And the reason I say that is if you look at the last two starting centers for the Blue Devils, the last two seasons, Mark Williams, Derek Lively, two elite shot blockers that can also switch out and guard the pick and rolls and are elite on the defensive side of the ball altogether. But as of right now, this team they have coming in next year, whether Kyle Filipowski, which he's been teasing all of us on Twitter, by the way, and I think he's having a little too much fun with it, and I like it. It's funny as hell. Makes me laugh every day. But anyways, even if Kyle Filipowski does come back, that's still leaving that typical Duke shot blocker that we've had the last 2 seasons. I do think Kel'el Ware is leaning more towards Indiana from what I'm hearing. I'm not talking to him, so I don't know. But Caden Shedrick, he's visiting Duke tomorrow. Maybe Coach Shire can work his magic. But anyway, either do what?
I think he does. I think Indiana gets Ware and Duke gets him.
Fair enough. Anyways, I just want an elite shot blocker in the middle, similar to the one we've had the last couple seasons. I think that's fair.
I think that's fair.
Anyways, that about wraps up all the time we have for today. As always, tell us what you liked, what you didn't like in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe to Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channel. Also follow the social media accounts on Facebook and Twitter. I got to get that ending part out of the way, but we got about 2 minutes left. Is there any random rants you want to go into?
Well, maybe not a rant, but just a statement to kind of make everything sad today. Today when we do this podcast, a day like today is a good reminder that we do sports as an escape from the kind of treacherous and sad modern world that we inhabit, and especially with today, the events that happen in downtown Louisville, a city where Les lives and I have been closely associated. It just hits a little bit close to home, even when you're talking about sports on a day like today. So my heart, and I'm sure Les's too, goes out to everyone who was affected by that tragedy downtown. And it's just hard, when it hits that close to home to think about things like sports. But we're glad that we have things like that as a means of having a little bit of brevity in the middle of a very tough day for a lot of people in this area. And as we said, our hearts go out to anyone who was affected by that mentally, physically, and those who have lost loved ones, those who had a little bit of a traumatic day today. And we just hope when we do stuff like this that we entertain you, because we know that out there, there's a lot of horrible, horrible stuff going on. So yeah, that's just it. We're thankful to have sports as our escape every day, because there's a lot of crazy, horrible stuff happening.
100%, very well said. And definitely, as Matt said, hearts go out to anybody who is affected by the tragedy today. And this is just a reminder that here at Less is More Sports, we are a fun podcast, and we want to be, like Matt said, your escape to what could be a really tough reality. So you won't see us really get political for that exact reason, but we hope you enjoy the show. That's all the time we have for today. So be sure to tune in next week.
Be safe and have a great week.